All right, hot take everyone, but Severance season 1, Severance as a whole is a really really good show. I know. Look, it took me a while to get to this show. I started it when it first originally came out. I got halfway through the season and the person I was watching it with is no longer part of my life, and I never kind of had the urge to reconnect with it. And then I heard season 2 was coming out, so I was like, I'll kind of wait until season 2 is coming out. But yes, I have watched season 1 of Severance. I am also 7 out of 9. No, I've watched the first 8 episodes of season 2, and the finale is dropping soon, so I'll speed run the last 2 episodes and then do a video on season 2. But I guess I wanted this video to serve as looking back on season 1, I suppose. I really enjoyed this season. Now, for those of you who don't know what this show is about, basically the premise is people can undergo a severance procedure where they've got a chip in their brain, and essentially when they go to work, they are a new person. They are a different person. Their brain is sectioned off to their work version of themselves and their normal outside life version of themselves. So the work person doesn't really remember what the non-work person is, and the non-work person doesn't remember the work person. So it's essentially like this fantasy, right, of, oh, wouldn't it be good if you could just go to work and just wake up when it's over? That is kind of the science fiction concept they're exploring here. But I think what the show does so well is, because that separate work person you create, that separate version of yourself you create, has to have its own memories and do its job, essentially, it becomes its own person. It's its own entity, its own consciousness with feelings, thoughts, desires. And that's where the show gets really, really fascinating. And I think the most interesting stuff in the show is sort of this moral dilemma and this interesting idea. Now, I will say from the jump, spoiler free, while we're in spoiler free section, they are their own person. They do deserve their rights, all right? Like, you know what I mean? Yes, technically they are a part of you, but while they're down there, this whole discussion of like, is it cheating if you sleep with an Audi, or if they, no, they're like different people. So you have to be okay with this version of yourself down there doing all kinds of things. And one of the most interesting parts of the show is how someone downstairs might get injured in a kind of nefarious way, or a really kind of work safe, dangerous way. And then the company will lie to the outside version of yourself and say it was just like a, you know, they tripped on their own accord, when in reality it was like a fight between two workers. So really interesting science fiction premise. Now, the performances here, the characters here are all incredible. I think particularly like Mark is a standout, obviously fantastic, played by Adam Scott in, yes, technically a comedic role, but not really. I think this is perfect. He's very dramatic, and I think he essentially pulls off 3 performances by the end of season 2. But the way he holds himself when he's his innie, his kind of work version, compared to his outie, his normal self, is remarkable. It's really good performance stuff. I think it's the most striking difference out of any character. It's just really like night and day, and that's because the version of him in the normal world, the unsevered version, or the outie, the version of him in the real world, right, is grieving the loss of his wife. And it's one of the most authentic portrayals of depression I've seen in a while. It's excellently well handled. And you contrast this with the Mark that works at this weird as fuck company, and he's just kind of like happy to be there. He seems really like a stickler for the rules, and he seems to really enjoy it. And this is all thrown into question when he meets our audience surrogate character, Hallie. So Hallie is introduced as someone who has just woken up in their severed version, their innie version, and we see what the life cycle looks like. They are essentially born like a baby who knows how to do all the things we do. You know what I mean? It's like if you had amnesia. You might know how to drive a car, you might know how to like unlock doors and stuff, but you don't know which one's your house. It's that sort of thing. So they know how the world works, they know how doors work, they know the birds and the bees, they know all that stuff. They just have no idea who they are. And the way the show introduces you to this concept with these questions that they can't answer, even though they clearly don't have memory loss, is just so well done. And now we're just going to get into full spoiler territory. If you're not sold on the show by now, what can I tell you? Go watch the show. It's excellent. It's beautifully well shot. The music is fantastic. And the opening credit sequence for both seasons, by the way, is remarkable. But now we just need to get into full spoilers because I really want to get into the nitty gritty with the characters. So as I was saying, right, Hallie is our audience surrogate character. The choice to have her outside version withheld from us and then to reveal to us that she is essentially the enemy. She is working for this evil company that has created the severance procedure, even though she hates the severance procedure. Like, her existence is, you know, she hates it. You know what I mean? She hates that she has to work down here, but her outside version wants her here, like really wants her here, and wants to keep doing it. It's just so fascinating and so well done. And I love that the outies and the innies sometimes serve as like polar opposites. Really interesting ideas. It makes you wonder whether the innie version is kind of like a repressed self, repressed emotions that you keep down. So for example, in season 2, we explore Dylan's character a bit more, and we find out that he's like depressed and kind of like a loser and a bad husband on the outside, but on the inside he like loves the idea of talking to his wife, and he values like talking to his children. And yes, you can make the argument that if the downstairs version, the innie version of Dylan, was kind of like exposed to his life, the thrill might wear off. But that's what makes this show so interesting, kind of ideas like this. Now, I'm just going to throw out my theory. I think it is a bit more kind of explored in season 2, so I'm keeping this locked to season 1, but I just want to say it, and I wish I said it years ago. In my opinion, macro data refinement, this eerie work that they're doing down there, has to be something to do with deleting other people's memories or their own memories, all right? It has to be something like that. Like, I just think that's such a satisfying, horrific idea, you know? And the reason I say that is because they have this whole thing of like the numbers that jump out to you, like do it on your intuition, like what jumps out to you is scary or menacing. And it has to be something to do with either their personality or someone else's personality. And yeah, I just find that really interesting. It can't be something like actually kind of work related, you know? It can't be like they're doing someone's taxes just in a weird form. Like, no, absolutely not. It needs to be something heady and existential. And that brings me to one of my favorite things about the show, in particular season 1, is I think season 1, less so than season 2, and I will talk about that in my season 2 video, but I think season 1 had the perfect balance of what was explained, what wasn't explained, the way it kind of explored the hypothetical situations and questions you'd have, I think was just really well done. I think it leans into this existential dread you'd have if you were an innie, like not knowing what's on the outside and kind of taking joy in these things, but also wondering what else is out there. It leans into really interesting questions about the morality and the ethics of it all, because when you meet Mark on the outside and he's justifying why he wants to do the severance and like, you know, it's less time being in his own head, it makes complete sense. And technically he should have the choice to do that. But then when you see the torturous existence of the innies downstairs, you're like, oh my God, like this is horrific. But at that point, they're two separate people. It's hard for Mark to care. And at the end of the day, he has the end call. At least we assume, you know, he can call it off. So really, really interesting stuff. But I think, again, the reason this show explores it so well is, you know, like when Hallie tries to self-delete, like that's, you're like, oh my God, like what would that even mean for the outside version of her outside family? Like, I just love that this show leans into the questions that you may have. You know, the closest example I can think of is The Substance. The reason I loved The Substance, the reason The Substance was my favorite movie of the year, is it takes a science fiction concept and explains just enough about the world, just enough to keep it eerie and understand kind of how it works, but keeps it locked into the characters. You know what I mean? I didn't need anything more in The Substance than just that phone call on the other end, that voice on the other end of the phone. You get what I mean? Like, I love that it was just this voice. Clearly they're a company. I didn't need some like insane backstory that it was like this cult that was into like eternal youth and they're trying to, like, no, you know what I mean? I love that it was eerie enough. You knew there was something going on there. You didn't know if they actually cared. Like, why do they do this? Those questions of like, why do they give this free drug to people? What are they planning? Makes The Substance eerie, and the world building is just enough to give you this awesome premise of, would you take it? What would you do? And I think I think Severance season 1 is just so good at answering enough questions where you're like, okay, I can see the problems here. It's excellent writing. And as you start having questions, they start answering it, you know? So you start wondering, like, the game-breaking moment for me in season 1 was that excellent scene where you find out Milchek can, while someone is their outie, right? While they're not at work, he can engage overtime protocol. That is a horrifying idea. So at any point, someone can just go up to a switch and switch you back. You know, so let's say I was severed and I'm walking around, someone could just switch me back and I'm back, and now they're talking to my innie self and they could leave me there for as long as they want. Horrifying idea. And they reveal that in the way that you experience it, the way the character is. You're like, oh my God, I didn't know this was something they could do. You're horrified, and it's really eerie and effective, and it completely breaks that character for a while, and rightfully so. It's really, really, really like exciting revelation, and it pays off in the season finale, which, by the way, the end of season 1 is one of the best season finales I have seen in quite some time. So now I'm just going to go through some bullet points, some notes I have on season 1. So I mentioned before Mark's depression. I just think it's one of the best portrayals of what depression looks like, and I think the flashbacks we get to old Mark, as well as the innie version of Mark, really kind of show Adam Scott's range. I think it's just excellent stuff. I love the way the dreams and the visions of the outside world leak in, particularly with Irving, right? I love the way that the show communicates that maybe the Severance chip sometimes is struggling. And I think the way it communicates this with Irving, where if he gets kind of like unfocused or not enough sleep or whatever's going on with his Audi, he starts having these visions of paint just falling down the walls. It's a horrifying, effective visual. And again, really creates this eerie vibe. And when you find out the payoff of what that painting is, the fact that he's obsessed, his outie is obsessed with something that his innie would have seen, and he's painting these walls, it's just so cool. Yeah, it's such a satisfying idea and cool, interesting moment. I also think the way they explore Petey and his like clash after being reintegrated is so well done. That horrifying sequence where like Mark puts down the banister to talk to him and then he's back in the bathroom. I will say I find the way the set design is done really eerie. I have to assume this is intentional, but there'll be all these sequences where someone's being reintegrated, right? So let's say Petey, he will be in, say, Mark's basement, and then when he gets reintegrated or he's having this clash of memories into his innie version, the layout of the room will be exactly one-to-one, just different. So let's say there's a fish tank here. When he goes to his innie version, there's a fish tank just with a different fish. It starts really raising these existential questions of all these people that are innies. Were they picked and targeted, and have they been studied their whole lives? Is Lumen kind of like recreating their outside existence inside for this like existential horror and dread? Like, how much does Lumen actually know? Even when Miss Cobell was getting involved with the baby, Devon's baby, Mark's sister's baby, I was seeing that being like, are they consistently grooming these people to become severed, to become innie? Like, how much control does this company have? What are they watching? What do they know? Because the reveal that Gemma, right? Mark's wife, who he believes passed away, is actually downstairs, and not that. You can say that's a coincidence and be like, oh, what? This is such a small world. I've seen people complain about that on the Reddit, saying, the feeling of this show is that Lumen was meant to be this multi-country conglomerate, but everything is so personal. Everyone knows each other on the outside and the inside. Everything's so linked. I think that's intentional, and I like that idea. I think maybe Mark was never not going to be severed. Maybe the car accident was on purpose. It's kind of reminding me of Hereditary, this idea that there is no free will, everything's planned. Maybe all of this stuff was orchestrated. Maybe they want Mark to be severed to see, if someone can be this close. As they say in the therapy sequence, if Mark and Miss Casey, Mark and Gemma don't even recognize each other but are trying to dig deep in each other's thoughts, it shows the severance procedure works. Similarly, I'm just reminded of how much I love that first therapy sequence with Irving and Gemma. Just incredible. Like, great comic humor, like genuinely great humor, but also just really fascinating watching them be like, your Audi, lifts weights that most people in his age bracket can't do. He knows the name of a bunch of different types of birds. And then Irving's like, wow. I also love the character motivation with Irving, the way him and Mark are kind of like really passionate about the company. And you see this stripped away very quickly with the introduction of Hallie. They start asking questions because Hallie is just so against it. And again, really interesting that Hallie's Audi is super pro Severance. Again, this really interesting like double side of a coin. But yeah, I really like the idea, and it's why I like season 1 so much. This looming existential dread of like, this idea that this company has their hands in everything. Like, even in season 2, you find out that Mark and Gemma donated blood at one point, and you see that Lumen is the company they're donating to. So it's like, did they have this on file? How much can they manipulate? Did they manipulate the car crash? Yada, yada, yada. Super interesting stuff. Now, minor side note, I will say I don't love the character of, is it Robinick?
Her name is Asal Ragabi. That's my bad. Ragabi.
It's the woman that in season 2 is trying to do reintegration, but in season 1, she's the one that hits the security guard over the head with the baseball bat. I don't love her inclusion. I don't love her introduction. You know what I mean? Like with Petey, it made sense for the character to kind of find Mark. And it does make sense for this woman to find Mark as well. I guess my issue is she just feels a bit like a plot device, a bit of an exposition dump. I don't know anything about her, what really makes her tick. Now, granted, we might find this out down the line, but it just, you know, when you can feel the hand of the writers, it's just a bit too much for me. Too much information too quick for mysteries that I would have liked stretched out a bit more. And yeah, I feel like she kind of comes out of nowhere. I don't really know what her deal is outside of her obsession with Mark. She just pops up when the story decides that we need to have some answers. I feel like it could have been handled a little bit better. I wish I cared about her more. I wish it was a character that turned, even if it was Miss Cobell, which I know given what we know about Miss Cobell is like a hard pill to swallow. But if we watch Miss Cobell become disenfranchised with the company over the first season, take a turn, and with all her knowledge actually start working with Mark to bring the company down, I would have found that a bit more satisfying because we know a bunch about Miss Cobell. Whereas, yeah, this character just kind of comes out of nowhere. And I thought Petey was serving that purpose until he died. Minor ding on the show, but nothing major. Getting back to what I love about the show and what the show does best is, again, as I said, like similar to The Substance, you hear this idea of severance and you're like, I would do that for sure, for sure. Like what a great idea that is. And then when you see the show play out, it explores the horror and the ramifications of that choice. So one of them being, I love when Irving and his love interest played by Christopher Walken, they essentially break up because Christopher Walken's outie is becoming unsevered. He doesn't want to do this anymore. So as a result, this person that Irving has fallen in love with ceases to exist forever. Tragic. Sad. Tragic. And, you know, it's interesting because Lumen, if they really wanted to, could fix this. They could probably offer Christopher Walken like a gazillion dollars, you know, like a bunch of money to just be like, hey, you know, maybe once a week, you know, you go down and get severed for like 4 hours and we'll pay you a fuck ton, you know, just to do that for like corporate morale. But Lumen's not interested in doing that. Like that's it. He's gone. And it's tragic. It feels like a death of a character, even though we know these characters on the outside. And that's why I think the show hits its stride. It's this feeling that these two characters are different people. Like Mark Outie and Mark Innie are really, they're in love with two different women. They have different goals. And even this idea that any of them can try and become reintegrated and merge, I'm like, one of them's going to like fight for control. One of them's going to stop existing. Like these are two separate people occupying the same body, occupying the same physical realm. Similar to the way, in my opinion, in The Substance, they shared a consciousness. It's like the reverse of that. They're sharing, in this one, they're sharing a body. In The Substance, they were sharing a consciousness across two bodies. In Severance, they're sharing two consciousnesses in the same body. We've had a lot of movies. We've had Mickey 17. We've had a lot of movies with different takes on like multiples and all this stuff. But regardless, I think it's just such like an interesting idea because I think there's a sense of tragedy. I think if either side wins or takes over, like one is going to stop existing. And this reintegration seems too good to be true. We saw what it did to Petey and it's like a mind fuck. Next, we have the Dylan waffle party. So he goes and gets some waffles because he's been working hard, right? And then we have this insane sequence where he essentially gets like this weird striptease from all these like strippers that are wearing Egan heads seemingly. And it's bizarre and horrifying and weird. And even Dylan is like, what the fuck am I doing? But it's so like eerie and weird in a good way. I thought this is where the show, I like when it leans into a bit of lore about who this company is, but not too much. And that's one of my kind of concerns about season 2, depending how it ends. But I thought this was perfect. It's just eerie enough. Also, another great idea, another incredible idea. Whoever writes this show needs a raise. But the idea that somehow they get their hands, the innies get their hands on this pathetic, shitty self-help book that sounds like baby's first life advice, but to them it's mind-blowing because again they kind of have like amnesia baby brain. So they look at this shitty book that the Audi Mark would completely ignore, and they look at it like this biblical text. Is one, a great joke, but two, also really tragic. Just perfect. All right, now in another cold take from me, another no shit take, the dance party sequence is just excellent. The dance party sequence is excellent. I love the way it's shot. There is a sense of happiness here. Milchek seems kind of cool, and we will talk about Milchek, don't worry, but I just really liked this sequence. And yeah, everything with Petey was excellent. I love the visual style here. Now, the finale kicks ass. The finale is so good. So we find out about this overtime protocol, and essentially the show delivers on it. I did not think we'd get this moment this early, but the introduction of that overtime protocol is so exciting. And essentially they pull off a heist. They pull off a heist movie, and Dylan manages to flip 3 switches all at the same time, and now the innies are on the outside world, just huge existential dread. Again, what I love about the show is when it answers all these questions. You're like, oh, what happens if the innies got out? And you get it. And it's crazy. It's awesome. They have no idea what to do with themselves. I kind of liked that Irving knew how to drive. Yes, he doesn't technically know how to drive, but as I was saying, they shouldn't know how to walk or anything if that's how, you know what I mean? It's like this intuition of muscle memory and what the body knows compared to what the mind knows. The body keeps the score. Really interesting stuff. So yeah, maybe he's not the most safe driver, but he can figure it out. And yeah, I thought it was so good. I thought it was so good. This like not reintegration moment, but this moment where they came up to the surface, and it's just like, what do you even make of the world? And that's one of my kind of minor notes with season 2 is it's hard to tell whether the payoff for season 2 after season 1, it really feels like this event was as big as the end of season 1 made it out to be. But again, haven't finished season 2, so I'll reserve my judgment. Now we're just going to go character by character, see what comes up. So I haven't talked much about Milchek, but Milchek's excellent. Amazing performance, and yes, obviously very sinister, and sinister because it doesn't feel like there's a threat of violence. It's just the power he has within the company is scary. It feels like he can essentially delete you at any time, and there's this cold, passive-aggressive demeanor. This might be a hot take, I'm not sure. I actually get the sense that he feels bad for some of the innies. He gets where it's coming from. You can see occasionally this tough, uncaring facade break a little, but I think his like loyalty to the corporation and his need to rise up the ranks kind of supersedes that. So occasionally you get these little glimpses of humanity from Milchek. I'm not sure if I'm alone in this, but I don't see him as this cold dystopian figure. I think there is a little humanity there, but at the end of the day, he's going to keep the company's best interest. But I think it's an excellent performance. I love how weird his dance sequence was. It felt like this weird intimidation tactic. I thought it was just excellent. Miss Cobell, I don't know if this is a hot take either. I wasn't watching this show with everyone else as it was coming out. Kind of struggling with Miss Cobell in season 1. I liked when she was really eerie. I liked when you slowly started to figure out that she wasn't severed. She was just doing this really elaborate act between her bottoms, like her outie and her innie. It was this like, I'm going to act like 2 people even though I'm not. This is really confirmed when she catches the Miss Cobell call out from Mark being really strange in the finale. So I really enjoyed the way Miss Cobell was set up as a character, what she represented. But as the season went on, I thought maybe she was a bit strange for stranger's sake, and I don't find her the most compelling and satisfying character, but this can be redeemed as the show goes on. This is like a temporary judgment and not a final thought, because I'm waiting for the show to wrap up in its entirety before I really stick to my guns on that one. I worry about the reveal of Mark's wife being Miss Casey. The reason I say that is because, yes, it's a really exciting reveal. It's a really satisfying reveal. And the ending of season 1, where he's like, she's alive, is chilling. It's so good. My only concern is, as I was saying before, I really hope they write it in a satisfying way that makes sense for them to be doing this. It's one of those reveals where you're like, whoa, that's crazy and so thought-provoking. I hope you actually have a smart answer as to why the company would be specifically wanting Miss Casey, wanting Mark. And again, I referenced this at the start. I love the idea that it is all connected. I just want it to make sense for the company. I don't want to be sitting there being like, well, that was such an obvious risk. Why would they do that? And as more things have been explained in season 2, which I'll get into in my season 2 review, I'm starting to scratch my head a little and be like, I kind of liked the ominous, scary vibe in season 1 we had of this company. As things have been revealed, it started to be a little like, it's like when you explain a joke too much, it's just like, yeah, okay. But season 1, I think it was perfect. So I love the reveal. I just hope they answer it well in full. I'm reserving judgment again. I love Dylan's character, love Irving's character. Hallie and Mark are all excellent. And I love, that Hallie is this driving force for Mark, Irving, and Dylan to team up and rebel against. And I love that Dylan was kind of the last to crack. Just really satisfying character stuff. And just real good stuff. And the reveal that Hallie works for the company is a great reveal. And I love that she's trying to navigate this in a way without getting caught, but it's like she doesn't even know what she does for work. Perfect execution of the premise, in my opinion, that season finale. Just wonderful. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please leave your comments below. I'm sure there's stuff I've forgotten and missed. I wish I was doing this as it was coming out, because just all my thoughts were racing while watching this show. But 9.5 out of 10. And depending on the answers we get throughout the season, this can easily bump up to a 10. This is peak television, probably the best show on TV right now. Even though I have a bit more notes for season 2, I think its highs are even higher than season 1. And again, I'll reserve judgment until the season is wrapped up. But thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting. Also, memberships to this channel. I'm covering White Lotus every episode as it comes out, and also a podcast covering everything I watch in a month. So that membership is cheap and it really helps out the channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will be doing a video on season 2 when it wraps, and have a lovely day. Thank you.